Have you ever thought about how the skills of, say, a really great leader might actually mirror those of a thoughtful parent?
Mm.
Or how understanding one might unlock insights into the other and maybe ultimately into yourself?
It's a really fascinating connection to explore, isn't it? I mean, whether you're guiding a team through some complex project or, helping a child navigate a tricky situation, there are these fundamental principles at play.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at these, well, surprising parallels between effective leadership and mindful parenting.
Right.
We've sifted through a whole range of ideas, management styles, the psychology behind how we see ourselves, how we encourage growth in others.
Even some really interesting perspectives on personal development itself.
Yeah, our goal really is to pull out the most valuable nuggets from all this for you, the learner.
We want to give you some practical ways to maybe assess your own approaches and cultivate growth, both in yourself and in your interactions with others.
So let's jump right in. One of the bedrock principles we kept bumping into is the vital importance of self-analysis, really taking that hard look in the mirror.
Indeed. The sources we looked at made it pretty clear that evaluating your leadership style, or honestly any consistent way you approach things, it's just a non-negotiable first step for any meaningful growth.
Right.
Like, for instance, if you notice a dip in your team's enthusiasm, maybe their motivation, that's a strong signal to re-examine how you're communicating.
Are your instructions clear? Is the feedback landing constructively?
Exactly. Or is it maybe coming across wrong?
And it's about more than just the final outcome, isn't it? We saw some compelling points about actively seeking feedback from people around you, your team, colleagues.
Yeah, because they often see things, aspects of our behavior that we're completely blind to ourselves.
Oh, definitely. Think of that classic scenario, right? The manager thinks they have this great open door policy,
Mm-hmm.
but the team actually feels kind of intimidated about walking through it.
Right. And what's interesting there is that true effectiveness, it isn't just measured by whether the project succeeded.
No.
It's deeply tied into the health of the team's dynamics, the relationships. A successful project driven by real collaboration. That says a lot about the leadership.
But a win that comes at the cost of morale,
Hmm.
with everyone feeling pressured and stressed.
Yeah, that suggests there's a fundamental flaw somewhere in the approach needs looking at.
Exactly. And let's zoom in on communication for a second. Are you actually getting information across clearly, or are things, getting lost in translation sometimes?
And the feedback piece, is it designed to build people up, or could it maybe be seen as overly critical? Because that can really chip away at trust.
Yeah, we learned that kind of negative communication is a huge trust eroder. It really is.
And consider this, effective leadership, much like, well, effective parenting, is often about adapting your style to the specific situation.
Right.
The sources really emphasize that maybe a more directive style is needed when you're facing a tight deadline, a crisis.
Sure, sometimes you just have to take charge.
But when the goal is more about fostering innovation, creativity, a more open, empowering approach usually works much better. It's about matching the style to the need.
Here's something that really struck me. It's so easy to get focused on the immediate results, the short-term wins, but we really need to be thinking about the long game too. Like, a really autocratic management style might get quick results now,
Yeah, it might.
but what's the potential long-term cost? To morale, stability.
Exactly. Can that kind of high-pressure environment truly foster sustainable growth, a healthy team culture? The sources suggest probably not. Effective leadership finds that crucial balance, right, between the short-term demands and the long-term well-being and development of the team.
And that adaptability has to extend to individuals too, right?
Sure.
What works for a seasoned pro might be totally wrong for someone new.
Absolutely. Tailoring the approach is key.
And, okay, when things inevitably go wrong, because they do,
They always do.
there's that real temptation to look outwards, point fingers, assign blame somewhere else.
It's natural.
But the real chance for growth, it seems, lies in turning that lens inward,
Right.
reflecting on our own contribution where they're scheduling mistakes. Could we have engaged the team better?
And what's insightful here is this idea of aligning your values with your actions. A leader who talks a big game about trust and autonomy,
Yeah.
but then constantly micromanages. That creates this, disconnect you can feel. It totally undermines the trust they claim to value.
So how do we get a more accurate picture of our impact then? Consistently, the sources pointed to the power of actively seeking out feedback from your team.
Yeah, whether it's through, structured surveys or just informal chats, understanding how your leadership style is actually perceived, that offers invaluable insights.
Now, if we draw that parallel back to parenting, it becomes even clearer, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's just like parents are constantly watching for subtle shifts in their kids' behavior and adapting how they parent.
Tuning in.
Effective leaders need to be just as attuned to their team's dynamics, adjusting their approach. Think about how a parent might reflect on, past arguments or situations to understand their child better.
Right, and we can apply that same idea, reviewing past projects, decisions, not just for what went wrong, but to understand our own leadership journey, our evolution.
That's a powerful way to put it. It's not just about adding up the wins and losses, is it?
And no, not at all. It's about recognizing that whole arc of development. And just like a kid's growth isn't always a straight line upwards.
Tell me about it.
Right. Our own personal growth is going to have its ups and downs. Setbacks are part of it.
And what's fascinating is the importance of, embracing that nonlinearity. Just like parents might get input from teachers or, other parents.
Getting that outside view.
We can benefit hugely from bringing external perspectives into our own self-reflection.
And just as parents might have hopes for their kids, we might feel disappointed in our own progress sometimes. The key seems to be focusing on the process, celebrating those small wins.
Like a parent celebrating a child learning to tie their shoes or something, those little milestones matter.
Exactly. And just as parents guide kids to learn from mistakes, we need to analyze our own setbacks to figure out what to do differently next time. It's all part of growing.
And like that patient observation a parent does, fostering confidence. Consistent self-reflection builds our own self-awareness over time.
This brings up an interesting point about being intentional, though. Setting clear goals for our self-reflection, kind of like how parents might have certain hopes for their child's learning.
Okay.
It gives us direction. But it's crucial to find a balance, right? Avoid being overly harsh on yourself because that's demotivating.
Yeah, definitely.
But also avoid being too lenient because then you don't make the necessary changes. Ultimately, this whole cycle, this continuous reflection, it strengthens all our relationships through better communication, better collaboration.
Okay, so we've established that critical need to look inward. But what happens when we, mess up? Let's dig into that very human tendency towards self-justification. Why it's so important to resist playing the blame game.
Well, what's insightful here is how naturally we tend to want to protect our ego when we make mistakes. It's almost a reflex, isn't it?
Totally.
But as the sources highlighted, when this becomes a habit, this pattern of self-justification, it can seriously block our ability to see the real root causes of problems, especially at work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Picture this. A project goes off the rails. Instead of the leader thinking, okay, what were my decisions, my guidance? The immediate reaction is often to point fingers.
Blame the team, blame the market, blame anything else.
Anything but themselves. And that defensiveness, as we learned, it just eats away at the foundation of trust within a team.
Yeah, consider a manager who blames an employee's mistake on, a lack of ability. Instead of asking, did I give them enough training? Were my instructions actually clear? That employee is likely to feel devalued, maybe less motivated. And that can impact the whole organization's performance, eventually.
And how often do we see those defensive reactions to feedback? Someone offers a suggestion, maybe points something out, and instead of thinking about it,
The walls go up.
yeah, the immediate response is to defend the current way, list all the reasons why it has to be this way. Excuses.
This brings up a crucial question about our willingness, really, to see failure as a chance to learn. When we get defensive, we basically shut the door on the insights that could help us grow.
Whereas being open to constructive criticism, even when it stings a bit.
Right. That allows us to see those missteps as, valuable data points for our development, stepping stones.
The sources even touched on the psychology behind this, mentioning Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory. How we subconsciously twist things.
Rationalize our actions.
Yeah. Shift blame just to keep feeling good about ourselves.
And what's significant is how this unwillingness to own our mistakes builds this huge wall against getting useful feedback if we're always deflecting.
Then we miss those different perspectives that are so essential for actually improving.
And this is particularly damaging for leaders, isn't it? Because their refusal to acknowledge errors can stifle open communication across their teams. It hinders innovation, problem solving, everything.
Yeah. So what's the antidote? How do we fight that impulse? The sources seem to emphasize taking a breath, calming down after something happens,
Mm-hmm.
and consciously pushing back against that immediate gut reaction of, it wasn't my fault.
Right. Instead, it's about trying to objectively identify, okay, where might I have made an error in judgment? Where could I have done things differently?
And think about organizational culture here.
Mm.
Some companies actually try to create an environment where failure is seen as, well, a learning opportunity.
Yeah, like those post-mortem meetings where teams openly break down what went wrong to learn from it. That kind of psychological safety makes it easier for people to admit their part.
Which fuels growth for everyone.
Exactly. And for leaders, that genuine willingness to accept feedback isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely vital. It shows humility, a commitment to getting better.
And that fosters a more open, honest environment for the whole team.
This brings up another important angle, perspective taking. The sources suggest that actively trying to see our actions from other people's viewpoints can be a really effective tool for building self-awareness.
Because our own view is always a bit subjective, right?
Inherently so. Seeking out and really considering those external views can reveal blind spots we'd completely miss otherwise.
And when those failures do happen, calmly looking at our own role instead of immediately blaming others is just paramount for making real progress.
And leaders who consistently model that kind of self-reflection and then actually take steps to improve, they inspire their teams to do the same. It's contagious.
So what's powerful here is that consciously working to overcome that natural pull towards self-justification. That's what turns failures from just, well, bad experiences into real opportunities for growth for everyone.
Individual and organizational, yeah.
All right, so we've taken a close look at ourselves, the importance of owning mistakes. Now, let's shift our focus outward. Let's explore how we can effectively evaluate growth in others, particularly within our teams.
Well, what's insightful here is that truly evaluating growth in others means looking beyond just the final score, the results. While outcomes matter, of course, the sources really emphasized assessing the whole process, the effort put in, new skills learned, how people handle the inevitable bumps in the road.
Exactly. A project might finish successfully, but was it just because someone was already an expert? Or did a team member clearly learn something new and apply it effectively?
Right. One source gave a great example of someone really improving their presentation skills through training and practice. That kind of effort and tangible progress. That deserves recognition.
Absolutely.
And consider this. Another key sign of growth is how people respond to feedback. Do they just sort of take it passively?
Or do they actively seek it out, ask questions, and then actually seem to try and incorporate it?
Exactly. That shift from passive to active engagement with feedback, that's a very positive sign of development. It's a real marker.
And what about when things don't go to plan? The sources highlighted how someone handles failures or challenges as a big measure of their growth mindset.
Yeah. Are they willing to take smart risks, learn from mistakes without getting defensive, and then apply those lessons next time?
We heard about an employee who revisited a project that has failed before, but with a fresh perspective, a refined approach, and succeeded. That shows huge growth.
And this brings up communication skills again. Tangible improvement in how someone communicates, within the team, maybe with other departments.
Yeah.
That can often be a clear sign of growth, even if it's not something easily measured by KPIs. Smoother collaboration, better information sharing that often comes from better communication.
And then there's self-management, right?
Right.
That growing ability to take initiative, manage their own time well, set and hit goals proactively.
Consistently pointed out in the sources that increasing autonomy is a strong sign of professional advancement. Someone who needed a lot of direction initially, but now plans and executes their work independently, clearly they've grown.
Definitely.
And what's significant is also looking at a subordinate's contributions to the team's goals. Are they just focused on their own tasks?
Or are they actively looking for ways to help colleagues contribute to the bigger picture?
Right. That kind of team-oriented thinking, that maturity, is a really valuable indicator of development.
The sources also reminded us it's not just about the numbers, the metrics. We need both quantitative and qualitative assessments.
Yeah, paying attention to the quality of growth, those subtle but important shifts in daily behavior and how people think.
Like an employee who starts proactively suggesting new ideas or finds solutions on their own, that shows a level of growth that might not show up on a performance chart.
Exactly. And if we take that longer view, real growth is a continuous journey, isn't it? Short-term successes are great, but it's crucial to consider how team members are actively learning, pursuing self-improvement, and how those efforts are shaping their future potential.
And finally, the sources highlighted self-awareness. Does the person have a clear sense of their own strengths and weaknesses? And are they actively working on them?
Yeah, that kind of reflective approach is key to evaluate when you're looking at someone's overall growth path.
So it sounds like evaluating subordinate growth really requires us, as leaders, to take a multifaceted approach.
Absolutely. It's about observing, supporting from different angles, recognizing not just the tangible results, but also that less visible but equally important journey of development.
Okay, so we've explored how to evaluate growth.
hmm
But what are the downsides of not doing that, of ignoring growth, failing to recognize development in people around us? Let's find out.
Well, what's insightful, or maybe concerning, is that overlooking growth can have a really significant negative impact, starting right at the individual level with motivation. Well, when someone's efforts to learn, to improve, just go completely unnoticed, they can gradually lose that internal drive, right? Become less willing to take on new challenges.
Yeah, I can see that. Imagine putting in time to master a new skill or really nailing a tough project and your manager just shrugs.
Exactly. The sources highlighted the very real risk of losing talented people who value recognition for their development. They'll likely start looking elsewhere for places where their growth is noticed and rewarded.
That makes sense.
And consider this, a lack of meaningful feedback basically leaves a subordinate in the dark about their own progress. Feedback acts like a compass, right? Guiding future efforts.
Without it, people can feel lost, unsure where they stand or where they're headed in the organization.
And the negative effects spread beyond the individual, too. They ripple through the whole organizational culture.
How does that work?
Well, the sources pointed out how ignoring growth can lead to this overall stagnation. It discourages innovation, discourages people from proactively learning new skills. And in today's world, that can put a company at a real disadvantage.
Okay, so motivation dips, people might leave, the culture stagnates. What else?
There's also employee confidence. When growth isn't recognized, it can make people doubt their own abilities. They become hesitant to step up, take on new things.
And that erodes confidence, which then probably impacts performance long term.
Precisely. And trust within the team can suffer too, right?
Yeah, the sources mention that. How neglecting growth erodes trust, shuts down open communication. If people feel unseen, unvalued for their efforts to improve.
They're less likely to ask for feedback or raise concerns proactively. Why bother?
What's also significant is how poor recognition can actually warp an employee's self-assessment
Yeah.
without regular constructive evaluation.
They might either become overly critical of themselves or maybe develop an inflated, inaccurate view of their skills. Neither is good for healthy growth.
And in an environment where progress isn't acknowledged, why would anyone stick their neck out with new ideas, take calculated risks?
Exactly. The sources highlighted how a lack of feedback can effectively kill creativity and innovation. You just end up with a culture of maintaining the status quo, playing it safe.
And the long-term result of all this?
Widespread underperformance, potentially. If individuals aren't motivated to keep improving, skills stagnate, and the whole organization becomes less agile, less competitive.
And it's not just the subordinates who lose out, is it? The sources noted that leaders who neglect this are also missing chances for their own development.
That's a great point. Effectively evaluating and guiding others is a skill in itself. It requires a continuous learning mindset from the leader, too.
It's like a reciprocal process. Leaders who seek feedback themselves are usually better at guiding their teams.
Right. Ignoring your employees' growth ultimately stunts the development of your own critical leadership skills, too.
So the takeaway seems crystal clear. Actively recognizing and evaluating growth isn't just a nice-to-have. It's absolutely essential for keeping people motivated and ensuring long-term success.
Couldn't agree more.
Now, let's explore the significant influence managers have, drawing that really compelling parallel to the role of a parent.
Yeah, what's insightful here is just how profound that connection is. How managers influence subordinates and how parents influence children. The sources highlighted how managers often act as mentors.
Shaping not just professional skills, but attitudes towards work development.
Absolutely. Just like parents nurture confidence and help kids thrive, managers have a similar responsibility to foster employee growth and prevent stagnation. It's that balance of support and guidance.
And the foundation of that relationship, like with parents and kids, needs to be built on trust and respect, right?
Totally, a bedrock of trust. When employees trust and respect their managers, they're way more likely to be engaged, motivated, willing to go the extra mile.
Just like kids who trust their parents approach challenges with more confidence.
Exactly. And just as parenting styles that are too strict or maybe too indifferent can hinder a child's development.
The same applies at work. Too much micromanagement stifles autonomy, initiative.
But complete indifference, lack of guidance, leaves people feeling lost and unsupported.
And this links back to self-determination theory, which the sources mentioned. Environments where people feel empowered have some autonomy.
Those are far more conducive to growth and intrinsic motivation. Managers who respect autonomy empower ownership. They're creating fertile ground for development.
Here's something that really resonates. Kids learn by watching their parents, right? Copying behavior.
Modeling.
Employees tend to do the same with their managers. So if a manager shows integrity, dedication, strong work ethic,
those positive traits are more likely to rub off on the team. But conversely, negative behaviors can be just as easily adopted.
and the tone a manager uses, their overall demeanor, the impact on well-being is huge.
Absolutely. Just like harsh words can hurt a child's self-esteem, a manager's negativity or constant criticism creates stress, anxiety. The sources even mentioned workplace harassment cases in Japan as a stark example of how language and actions directly impact mental health.
Wow. But on the flip side, positive reinforcement praise, genuine gratitude that's incredibly powerful too.
Cannot be overstated. Just like a parent's appreciation boosts a child's self-esteem, acknowledging an employee's efforts, celebrating successes.
It reinforces their sense of accomplishment, motivates them to take on more.
Right. And think about providing support during tough times. Another clear parallel.
Like parents offering empathy when kids struggle.
Managers need to offer encouragement, constructive advice when team members hit roadblocks or challenges. Be there for them.
And just believing in people can be potent. The sources highlighted how simply saying, I know you can handle this. I trust you with this.
That can instill confidence, leading people to exceed expectations, like a parent's unwavering belief empowering a child.
And thinking bigger picture, a manager's values really shape the whole workplace culture, don't they?
Deeply influence it, just like parental values shape the home atmosphere. Managers championing openness, collaboration, support, they cultivate a healthier, more productive environment for everyone.
So that manager as parent analogy really hits home regarding the influence and responsibility leaders have.
It really does.
Now let's dig into a shared struggle for both parents and managers. Admitting when we've messed up. That difficult process.
Ah, yes. What's insightful, and perhaps comforting in a way, is how universally hard this seems to be for both roles.
Right. Thinking about those moments we regret an emotional reaction, snapping, giving harsh feedback, without really thinking about the other person's side or what was going on.
Exactly. A parent might yell, "Just try harder," at a struggling child, only to realize later the kid was overwhelmed or didn't understand.
Or a manager excessively criticizes an employee for a delay, without knowing about the unexpected hurdles they faced.
And regret often comes from those high expectations we set, doesn't it? For our kids, for our teams. And then later realizing maybe those expectations were unrealistic or we didn't communicate them well.
And how often does that pressure for immediate results lead to short-sighted reactions we regret later?
All the time. A parent focusing only on grades, maybe missing the chance to nurture a love of learning, a manager prioritizing short-term targets over long-term development.
And that lack of tolerance for failure. That's a big one too.
Huge. Reacting harshly to minor mistakes, whether it's a child learning or an employee developing, that lack of acceptance can definitely breed regret when we later see it was a learning moment.
Insufficient communication pops up again as a major source of regret.
It really does. A parent regretting not noticing signs their child was being bullied because they weren't having those open talks.
Or a manager missing signals, an employee was drowning in work, only realizing after a major error.
And misunderstandings, they're so easy, aren't they? They easily lead to regret. A parent misinterprets behavior, reacts negatively, finds out the real reason later.
A manager misjudges a decision without all the facts or understanding the thinking behind it.
And the sources also highlighted, again, failing to take that long-term view. Focusing too much on the immediate can make us miss chances to foster long-term growth, resilience, both at home and at work.
And that deep sense of responsibility parents and managers feel.
It can actually amplify the regret when things go wrong. We tend to internalize it, thinking, what could I have done differently?
But while regret feels bad, the sources emphasized it's not necessarily negative. It often comes from genuine care, responsibility.
And it provides incredibly valuable lessons. It can help us refine how we interact, build stronger, more supportive relationships going forward, if we let it.
So how can we learn from regret constructively? Use it as fuel for positive change.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Exactly. Which brings us neatly to our next point, taking concrete action. What are some specific steps for real self-improvement based on everything we've discussed?
Well, what's insightful is that meaningful growth really starts with that honest, accurate assessment of where we are right now.
Okay.
The sources warned against ignoring external feedback because that just limits our self-awareness, hinders identifying where we need to develop.
Right. So step one is getting a clear, unbiased picture. And one practical tool mentioned was documenting daily actions and decisions like journaling.
Yeah, as a way to spot recurring patterns, our strengths, but also where we tend to stumble.
And actively seeking feedback from various sources, absolutely crucial. Helps uncover those blind spots, overcome our own limited view, making it regular, intentional.
Definitely. And just wanting to improve isn't enough, is it? The sources stressed setting clear, specific, measurable goals.
Not just be a better communicator, but something concrete like, I'll actively listen without interrupting in meetings and ask at least 2 clarifying questions.
Exactly. Measurable actions. And this brings up regular reflection. Not just a passing thought, but dedicating time to reflect on actions, emotions, reactions.
Helps identify stress triggers, what brings satisfaction, guides growth more meaningfully.
And the sources introduced behavioral analysis, basically, systematically looking at the outcomes of our actions, what works, what doesn't.
Helps reinforce effective behaviors, reduce ineffective ones, like analyzing why a time management technique failed or succeeded.
And what's significant is that there are tools we can use too, right? Personality assessments, strengths finders like StrengthsFinder or MBTI, they can offer deeper self-understanding.
But it's so important to remember this is personal. The sources emphasize focusing on our own progress over time, not getting bogged down comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah, that comparison trap is easy to fall into. Celebrate your individual milestones instead.
And establishing regular feedback sessions, formal or informal check-ins, provides those invaluable objective insights for continuous improvement.
And the crucial final step, translating all that analysis into concrete actions, making tangible changes. Analysis without action doesn't lead anywhere.
Absolutely. Which loops back to creating a long-term personal growth plan based on that ongoing self-analysis, making development a continuous priority.
It really underlines that self-analysis isn't static. It's an ongoing, dynamic process of learning, adapting, refining. Lifelong.
Now, we've talked a lot about structured approaches, planning, but life, both as parents and leaders, often throws curveballs, doesn't it?
Constantly.
So let's explore that critical factor of flexibility and the valuable lessons we can learn from parenting here.
Yeah, what's insightful is how fundamentally parenting demands navigating the unexpected. The sources kicked off with that relatable scenario. Kids suddenly gets a fever.
Instantly, plans go out the window. Schedules disrupted. Parents have to adapt right then and there.
Exactly. And it's not just the big things. The sources highlighted how those small, everyday parenting decisions build our adaptability muscles. Kid refuses homework.
It's not just do it. It's often investigating why. What's the resistance about?
Right. And as kids grow, their needs change constantly. Parenting a toddler is worlds away from supporting a teenager seeking independence. Parents have to keep adjusting strategies.
And it often forces us to reevaluate our own values and expectations, doesn't it?
Definitely. Kids don't always follow the scripts we might have written for them. Recognizing, respecting their individuality, letting go of rigid hopes, crucial for a healthy relationship.
This brings up responsiveness. When problems pop up, sibling arguments, whatever a prompt, calm response is usually better than an immediate emotional blow-up. Requires flexible problem solving.
And the flexibility within the relationship impacts emotional development hugely. Overly rigid rules, no adaptability, that can stifle self-expression, identity. A more flexible environment encourages kids to share, explore.
And parenting today also means adapting to wider societal changes, new education methods, technology. Parents are navigating these things alongside their kids.
What's significant is that embracing flexibility isn't just good for the kids. The sources pointed out it actually promotes the parents' own growth. Challenges biases, fixed ideas.
And supporting kids through challenges requires that balanced, consistent support, but adapting how you support based on age, maturity, the specific issue.
Absolutely. A younger child might need more direct help, an older one more guidance to find their own solution.
And the adaptability we learn as parents, adjusting our approach, empathizing with changing needs. The sources concluded these are incredibly valuable skills at work too.
Enables us to tailor guidance. Support to employees' individual strengths, challenges, much more effective.
So the takeaway is that adaptability and empathy learned through parenting. They're truly transferable skills. They enhance all our relationships.
Foster better communication, trust, more supportive interactions everywhere.
Yeah. Now, what happens when that trust is damaged? Let's dig into that complex, delicate process of rebuilding trust in relationships.
Yeah, what's insightful, or maybe just realistic, is that rebuilding trust is definitely not quick. It takes time, sustained effort, real commitment.
So where do you start?
The sources emphasize the very first step is accurately identifying the root cause. Why was trust broken? Was it poor communication? Misunderstandings? Misaligned expectations?
Like, if a manager isn't clear about project expectations and the employee underperforms, that can cause frustration, erode trust on both sides.
Exactly. Open, honest dialogue to really understand what happened, everyone's perspective, is crucial.
And self-reflection from the person who maybe caused the breach, also vital.
Absolutely. In a work context where there are harsh reactions, emotional outbursts, failure to follow through, revisiting your own behavior, offering a sincere apology when needed, that's a powerful first step.
And it's not just about our role. Actively trying to understand the other person's perspective through empathy, dialogue.
Taking time to really listen to their concerns, anxieties, what support they felt they needed but didn't get. That provides invaluable insight.
This brings up a critical point about consistency, doesn't it? Words aren't usually enough.
Rarely. Consistent actions are essential. Reliably keeping promises, meeting commitments, showing dependable behavior over time. That's how you gradually regain lost trust. Demonstrating reliability is paramount.
Small, consistent positive gestures can help too, right? Regularly expressing gratitude, acknowledging efforts, showing people they're valued.
Definitely. Those consistent positive interactions slowly rebuild that sense of trust. Psychological safety.
And actively supporting growth plays a role too.
What's significant is, yes, when trust is damaged, providing constructive feedback, offering development opportunities, genuinely investing in someone's growth. That shows commitment to their success, helps them regain confidence in you and the relationship.
And transparency seems key. Openly discussing problems, sharing information, collaborating on solutions.
Rather than hiding issues or shifting blame.
Yeah.
Openness fosters an environment where trust can start to regrow.
And thinking about feedback specifically, improving how we give and receive it is crucial too.
Even necessary criticism, if delivered positively and actionably, it's much easier to accept and move forward. Vital for restoring trust.
It sounds like a marathon, not a sprint.
Definitely. The sources consistently stress that rebuilding trust needs a long-term perspective, unwavering, consistent effort. Patience and persistence are key.
And maybe looking at the overall team or organizational culture.
That's an important consideration. While specific incidents break trust, the underlying culture often plays a big role. An environment with open communication, respect, collaboration. That provides a stronger foundation for trust and makes resolving issues easier when they happen.
So rebuilding trust is complex. It takes time, effort, commitment to understanding the root causes.
Multifaceted, for sure.
Now let's explore the power of perspective specifically, that challenging but rewarding process of seeing ourselves clearly.
Yeah, what's insightful here is that while objective self-reflection is fundamental for growth, it's often one of the hardest things to do. We all have biases, blind spots that cloud how we see ourselves.
Totally. And that's where feedback from others is just so crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely. The sources highlighted how feedback can light up those hidden biases, point out areas where we can really improve. When someone, especially a leader, truly takes that feedback on board, powerful catalyst for change.
Consider this. Just actively being aware of how others perceive us in daily interactions can spark valuable self-reflection.
Thinking about the impact of our behavior communication style, reactions on others can help us adjust, become more effective, like someone who interrupts constantly in meetings.
Becoming aware of that through feedback is the first step to changing it.
Exactly. And humility is critical here, isn't it?
Seems to be.
The sources stressed maintaining humility, genuinely listening to others' opinions, even when they differ from ours, overestimating ourselves, being unwilling to consider other views, huge barrier to seeing our flaws.
And this links to empathy too. Trying to see ourselves through others' eyes enhances empathy, understanding.
Like a manager, considering how their maybe overly strict instructions are received, they're more likely to adjust, offer more supportive guidance.
And feedback isn't just about finding flaws. It also clarifies the direction for improvement, right? Highlights where to focus energy for the biggest impact.
Right. And what's significant is managing our emotional response to feedback, especially if it's critical, resisting that defensive urge.
Responding calmly, thoughtfully,
Yeah.
crucial for growth and relationships.
And the sources also underscored the value of seeking perspectives from diverse people, different backgrounds, experiences. That challenges our assumptions, offers fresh insights into our own behavior values.
Now, thinking about recognizing our own limitations, acknowledging others' viewpoints often helps us see where our own knowledge or skills might be lacking.
Yeah, we don't know what we don't know. External views illuminate those gaps, inspire us to learn more.
Even feedback from close relationships, family, friends can be incredibly valuable for personal growth.
They often see patterns like how stress makes us more reactive, that we're totally blind to ourselves.
And this brings up leadership again. Leaders who prioritize seeking and acting on feedback show flexibility, commitment to continuous improvement.
Absolutely. Ultimately, the sources concluded that proactively integrating others' perspectives just accelerates personal growth. Recognizing our limits, biases, opens us up to learning, cultivates greater, more accurate self-awareness.
It's like a continuous feedback loop, isn't it? Seeking perspective leads to reflection, fuels growth, which then changes how we interact.
An ongoing cycle of learning and development.
Exactly. Now, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's circle back to that significant theme. The common regrets shared by parents and managers. Those valuable lessons learned through reflection.
Yeah, what's insightful is that recurring pattern of regret, often coming from those impulsive emotional reactions.
When we haven't fully considered the other person's view or the context.
Yeah,
Relatable for both roles.
exactly. The parent snapping, the manager giving harsh feedback in the moment. Later reflection often shows a more empathetic approach would have been better.
And regret also comes from those high expectations we set, right? For kids, for teams. And later realizing they might have been unrealistic or poorly communicated.
Definitely. And that pressure for immediate results can lead to actions we regret, prioritizing short-term gains over long-term well-being and growth.
And the lack of tolerance for mistakes. Reacting harshly to errors, whether from a child learning or an employee developing.
Often leads to regret when we see those missteps were essential learning moments.
Insufficient communication keeps coming up too. Missing signs someone's struggling, not having those open conversations, looking back wishing we'd been more attentive.
And misunderstandings breeding regret because we didn't take time to understand intentions, perspectives, reasons behind actions, whether it's a child or a subordinate.
And again, failing to adopt that long-term perspective. Focusing too narrowly on immediate issues can be a major source of regret later.
Now, considering that deep sense of responsibility we feel, that can sometimes amplify regret when things don't go as hoped. We internalize setbacks, dwell on what-ifs.
But, as we discussed, regret, while uncomfortable, often stems from love, care, responsibility.
And importantly, it provides incredibly valuable lessons that can help us improve how we interact and support others in the future.
So the final thought there is, how can we consciously learn from those regrets and actively apply the lessons to shape future interactions?
A powerful question to carry forward.
Absolutely. And speaking of applying what we've learned, let's quickly revisit those practical tools for deeper self-analysis we touched on, just to bring it all together actionably.
Yeah, it all comes back to that fundamental need for objective self-assessment, doesn't it? The sources highlighted the practical value of consistently documenting daily actions, maybe journaling,
As a powerful way to spot recurring patterns, good and bad.
and actively, consistently seeking feedback from diverse people, still a cornerstone for gaining those crucial external perspectives, lighting up blind spots.
Consider this. Setting clear, specific, measurable goals gives that essential roadmap for our development journey.
And making dedicated time for regular self-reflection on actions, emotions, experiences helps identify triggers, motivations, guides development intentionally.
The sources also mentioned behavioral analysis, systematically examining outcomes to see what approaches work and which fall short.
And for deeper insights, exploring reputable personality or strengths assessment tools can offer valuable self-awareness.
But always remembering to focus on our own individual growth journey, not unhelpful comparisons.
Establishing regular feedback sessions, formal or informal, provides ongoing objective insights vital for improvement.
And perhaps the most critical step, consciously translating all this self-analysis into concrete actions, making tangible changes.
Which leads back to creating that long-term adaptable personal growth plan grounded in ongoing self-analysis, ensuring sustained development, lifelong learning.
It really emphasized self-analysis isn't a one-off task, is it?
No, it's a continuous evolving process of learning, adapting, refining ourselves throughout life, personal and professional.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we've explored these intricate connections between self-awareness, understanding others' growth, and the profound, often parallel lessons from leadership and parenting.
And for you, the learner, our hope is you now have a more comprehensive, actionable framework for deeper self-analysis and a richer understanding of how to foster growth in those around you.
Exactly. So here's a final thought to carry with you. Consider just one small, specific action you can take today, inspired by these insights, to either gain a better understanding of yourself or to actively support the growth of someone you interact with.
Just one small step.
What might be the unexpected ripple effect of that single intentional step?